The rain was coming down in thin silver needles when Daniel Carter realized that tonight would change his life forever, even though he had no idea how or why yet. The party lights behind him blurred into useless colors as he guided the expensive black car onto the empty road, his hands trembling not from the cold but from the weight of everything he carried inside his chest. He was a single father, exhausted and invisible, driving his drunk boss home at midnight, wondering how a man could give so much of himself every day and still feel like he was barely surviving. In that quiet car, with the city sleeping and his thoughts screaming, fate was already clearing its throat. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet sacrifices that often go unnoticed, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Daniel's life had been a long stretch of early mornings and late nights ever since his wife passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him alone with a 4-year-old son named Noah and a world that did not slow down for grief. He worked as a senior assistant at a large marketing firm, a job that sounded important but paid just enough to keep the lights on and the fridge half full. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, packed Noah's lunch, tied his tiny shoes, and whispered promises that tomorrow would be better, even when he did not fully believe it himself. By day, Daniel was reliable, invisible, and hardworking. By night, he was a father reading bedtime stories under flickering lamps, calculating bills in his head, and wondering how long a heart could stretch before it tore. His boss, Victoria Reynolds, lived in a completely different universe. She was sharp, commanding, and untouchable, known throughout the company for her impossible standards and icy professionalism. Employees admired her success and feared her disapproval. To Daniel, she was simply the woman whose approval kept his job safe and whose disappointment could end his fragile stability. That night's company celebration had been loud, glittering, and full of forced smiles, celebrating a major deal that Victoria had closed almost single-handedly. Daniel had planned to leave early, as he always did, but when he saw her struggling to stand, her confidence drowned in too much alcohol, something inside him could not walk away. He offered to drive her home because it felt like the right thing to do, even though it meant calling a neighbor to stay with Noah and pushing his exhaustion even further. In the car, Victoria was unrecognizable, her power stripped away by slurred thoughts and heavy silences. Daniel focused on the road, on the soft hum of the engine, and on keeping everything together. He did not judge her or resent her. Instead, he thought about how loneliness wore different masks on different people, how success did not protect anyone from pain, and how some nights were heavier than others. When he finally dropped her off at her high-rise apartment, he made sure she was safe inside before quietly leaving, never expecting acknowledgement or gratitude. To him, it was just another small kindness folded into a life full of them. He drove home through empty streets, his body aching, his mind already worrying about the morning alarm and Noah's breakfast. He slept only a few hours, curled on the couch so he would not wake his son when dawn arrived too quickly. The next morning at work felt heavier than usual. Daniel expected nothing more than a polite nod or, more likely, complete silence. He returned to his desk, drowning in emails and deadlines, trying to ignore the familiar ache in his chest that came from always being needed but rarely seen. The office buzzed as usual, but something felt different, like the air before a storm. When Victoria arrived, she did not sweep past him like she usually did. Instead, she paused, her expression unreadable, her eyes holding a depth he had never seen before. That morning, she remembered everything. She remembered the quiet ride, the way Daniel had spoken gently, the way he had not taken advantage of her vulnerability or complained about the inconvenience. She remembered how small she had felt despite her success, and how safe she had felt in that silence. What Daniel did not know was that Victoria had spent the night awake, sober, and shaken, thinking about her own life, her empty apartment, and the distance she had built between herself and the world. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began to ripple through Daniel's life. His ideas were suddenly being acknowledged in meetings. His workload shifted in ways that felt more sustainable. When he requested flexible hours to care for Noah during a school emergency, the approval came instantly, without guilt or explanation. It felt surreal, like someone had finally noticed the weight he carried. But the biggest shift came when Victoria asked him to take on a leadership role he never thought he would be trusted with, citing his integrity, consistency, and character rather than his job title. Daniel struggled with doubt, wondering if he deserved this attention or if it would vanish as quickly as it appeared. He worked harder than ever, driven not by ambition but by the hope of building a stable future for his son. Slowly, life softened around the edges. Bills stopped feeling like immediate threats. No's laughter came easier. Even Daniel's reflection looked less tired, less broken, more human. What Daniel never expected was how much his simple act of kindness had changed Victoria as well. She became more present, more patient, and more human in her leadership. She started mentoring instead of intimidating, listening instead of commanding. And though she never spoke openly about that night, the respect she showed Daniel was louder than any words could have been. Years later, Daniel would look back on that rainy night as the quiet turning point of his life. Not because it brought sudden wealth or fame, but because it reminded him that kindness is never wasted, even when it feels invisible. Sometimes, the smallest acts ripple outward in ways we cannot imagine, touching lives, opening doors, and healing hearts we never meant to reach. If this story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of sacrifices you or someone you love has made in silence, please take a moment now to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Comment what lesson this story gave you and whose life it reminded you of. Daniel's journey was never about driving his boss home or being noticed at last. It was about choosing compassion when no one was watching, about showing up even when he was tired, and about believing that goodness, no matter how small, eventually finds its way back. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between struggle and hope, his life finally began to feel whole again.